So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight into this because recently you had President Trump, if you remember, he announced that JD Vance would be put in charge of tackling the massive fraud in this country, a fraud czar, it's being called. And he officially went on the record saying Ilhan Omar committed immigration fraud. Yeah, and so this is big because this is also happening at the same time that the DOJ has started working on denaturalization cases. And so now you're starting to see multiple pieces moving at once. And so let's break it all down. As always, if you enjoy the content, smash that thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know. Stay locked in with the future videos, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you hit all for your notifications. That way you never miss when I drop. Let's get right into it.
Talk about Ilhan Omar and Tim Walz.
Exactly.
And obviously, Ilhan Omar, the president and the White House have been out saying that she married her brother, that there is immigration fraud going on here. These are deportable denaturalization offenses. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, so we actually think that Ilhan Omar definitely committed immigration fraud against the United States of America. And I talked to Stephen Miller about this actually recently. We're trying to look at what the remedies are. That's the thing that we're trying to figure out is what are the legal remedies now that we know that she's committed immigration fraud? How do you go after her? How do you investigate her? How do you actually do the thing? How do you build the case necessary to get some justice for the American people? There's a related issue, Benny, which is she has been at the center of a lot of the worst fraudsters in the Somalian community. So do I know that Ilhan Omar was aware that the Quality Leering Center was defrauding the American people? I'm not certain of it, but we at least need to investigate it, because if people can commit wrongdoing without even the fear that they're going to be found out, that's a fundamental problem. So I'm worried about the immigration fraud. I'm also worried about what did Ilhan Omar know about what was happening in the Somali community, and why was nobody looking into it until, frankly, Donald Trump came along.
So you heard that. That was major. The vice president coming out and saying Ilhan Omar committed immigration fraud. That's a big statement. Now, at this point, it comes down to the ability to build a case and proving it, right? And that's how it always goes, right? Where in criminal cases, it's not about whether the government, state, attorney general, whoever knows a crime was committed. It comes down to whether they can actually prove it. Can they gather the evidence, put it together, and make it stick? That's the reality. I mean, I know people may not like to hear that, but that's what it comes down to. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what you really know. It's about what you can really prove you know. And according to JD Vance, that's exactly where things are headed next. But let's get into this next clip, because JD Vance lays out how the Trump administration plans to tackle this issue. And honestly, it's wild to think this kind of structure wasn't already in place, but let's check it out.
Here's the basic problem that we've had in this government going back for probably 30 or 40 years, is that you've never had an administration that has really taken this seriously until the president put us really from day one of the Trump administration, who said we have to take the fraud issue seriously. And a lot of the anti-fraud protections that existed in our government for a very long time were actually turned off by the Biden administration. So we think fraud has been a problem for a long time. It became a massive, massive problem under the Biden administration. We're going to do a number of things. First of all, we're going to turn back on those anti-fraud protections so that all of these cabinet officials are looking at what's going on and focusing on it. The second thing is that we're going to take a whole of government approach. So much of what's going to make the anti-fraud task force work is that we're communicating across different departments. So when Bobby Kennedy is talking to Scott Bessent about things that he's seeing in Medicare and Medicaid, when Scott is seeing things at Treasury, when Brooke is seeing things at Agriculture, when Scott is seeing things at Housing and Urban Development, what we're going to actually do is force the bureaucracy to take this seriously and work together as political principles to make sure that we stop allowing fraudsters to steal the American people's money. And that brings me to my final point before I'll kick it over to Andrew, who is leading this anti-fraud task force. This is not just theft of the American people's money. This is also theft of critical services that the American people rely on. Some of you have heard me tell this story before, but I think that the autism scam that we've seen in the Somalian parts of Minnesota really illustrates well what's been going on across whole layers of our government. So you have a program set up under Medicaid to help autistic children and their families get the resources that they need, because of course we know that when you have a kid who's on the spectrum, it requires a little bit more help, a little bit more services. And so the government, enforcing the mandate from the American people to be kind and compassionate to our citizens, has set up this program to help families who are dealing with these particular struggles. Now, what we've seen is Somali fraudsters at an industrial scale taking advantage of that program to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. And there are two separate tragedies there. The first tragedy is that you have people who pay into the federal government, who pay into the IRS, who pay their taxes expecting that those taxes will go to help their fellow citizens, and it's not going there. It's going to help fraudsters. That's tragedy number one. And the more important tragedy is that you have families who need these services who are unable to get them because people are getting rich off of fraud schemes instead of making sure that autistic children and their families get access to these resources. And unfortunately, that story, while it's very concrete and very obvious what we're seeing in Minneapolis, it is replayed again and again and again across many states and across many different programs. It has to stop. The President of the United States has ordered us to stop it, and that's what this task force is going to do. So without further ado, I'll kick it over to Andrew.
Yeah, and so you guys who have been following the channel for some time now, you've heard me speak about the level of fraud that exists and is able to exist because enough people are working together, playing their role. And that's what you saw take place in Minnesota, where you have families who were literally receiving kickbacks, were allowing these fraudsters to use their children in these autism programs and claim they were autistic. Parents were receiving kickbacks as large as $1,500 per child per month, according to the DOJ, which is insane. But let's go ahead and jump into the next clip because you have JD Vance. You just heard him announce that Ilhan Omar committed immigration fraud. Then you heard him explain how the fraud in this country is able to take place in places like Minnesota, where it's able to transpire for so long. And so now let's go ahead and jump into this next clip that breaks it down more. Take a listen.
Vance revealing the DOJ has never had a specific task force to investigate fraud, ever. They don't care. And that the government has never prosecuted fraud under $1.5 million. So if you've wanted to steal like 500 grand, the government has been a great mark for the past several decades. Vowing to coordinate between all branches to end this nonsense is the new plan. Vance sat down for an interview with Benny Johnson, spoke about Somali fraud, spoke about the queen of the Somali fraudsters, our friend Ilhan Omar. Take a listen.
Ilhan Omar definitely committed immigration fraud against the United States of America. She has been at the center of a lot of the worst fraudsters in the Somalian community.
Yeah, she married her brother to get him in, which means they both should go back. Benny Johnson is with us now. Good to have you. Good to see you again. Everywhere that gets investigated, they find billions of our dollars stolen. Nobody cares, and it's so infuriating. What did you witness today?
Yeah, I witnessed something that made my blood boil as an American taxpayer, that we are not too far away from this entire country just going completely over a cliff, Rob. And it sucks because I have kids here and I want to stay in America. I want to raise my kids as Americans. But if you bring in people who are not harmonious with Western civilization and a high trust society, and then you give them the opportunity to simply write their name on a slip of paper and lie to the federal government, which is what Stephen Miller talked about today, and they can just lie about how many kids they have, what diseases their kids have, and there's no way to check. The federal government doesn't check. They just write a blank check to those states. And so that's how the Somali community gets away with it. And JD Vance revealed to me today in our 35-minute sit-down interview that there is no investigation of any fraud under $1.5 million. So you just might as well stroke. Boom, a $1.5 million check to anybody who wants to lie to the federal government. What kind of a message are you sending?
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's insane, but not really surprising. I'm not shocked, at least, not at all, honestly, that this sort of thing has been able to transpire for so long with no real consequences. That's how it gets to the point where it balloons to the level it is now over time. And the people committing this fraud do it so blatantly because they know there's no real checks and balances, right? Because let's be real, what happened in Minnesota wasn't some Ocean's 11 style heist with sophisticated networks. No, it was out there right in the open and completely ignored. You had a 22-year-old independent journalist come in and blow up the whole thing. And now you're seeing the same thing being uncovered in California with fraud. And I'm sure it's happening in other places too, if they actually start to look for it. And so let's go back to the interview now, because this is something that, again, has a lot of people concerned when they hear about how the system actually works and how long it has been going on. But let's continue.
Well, what people need to see, I think that the fraud has been laid bare. We've all seen the Leering Center, right?
Correct.
The Leering Center is not an actual daycare.
No.
The Leering Center was fraud, right? And we've seen the hospice fraud in California. And so I think it's been demonstrated that this is a problem. What people need to see now is like arrests,
yes,
right?
100%.
Deportations. They need to see that the federal government, the gears of justice grind against these people, and they're not allowed to just continue.
Yes. So let me give you an example, something I just talked about upstairs, but I think it's worth reiterating for your viewers. So you take a program that exists within Medicaid to help autistic children get the resources that they need. So you have a Somalian fraudster in suburban Minneapolis who says that they have 3 kids who are autistic, and maybe they don't even have 3 kids, and they certainly don't have 3 kids who are autistic. So it takes money away from the American citizens who need these services. It defrauds the taxpayer. And you're absolutely right that the thing that we need to do is get real justice. So, you know, something I learned just the past couple of months, I had no idea that we do not prosecute fraud in this country if it's under $1.5 million per year. Okay? So think about that. Think of all the people who are $1.5 million a year. This is not chump change. That is meaningful money. And by the way, sometimes by prosecuting the lower level people, you get to the higher level people who are collecting, you know, who have sort of the conspiracy to commit fraud against the American people. So one of the things that we're trying to do with this task force is commit the Department of Justice to investigating all fraud and actually going after the people who are doing it at the small scale of $1.4 million, but also actually looking at the big conspiracies that are out there. Because, Benny, I don't know about you, but I do not believe that what happened with the Somalian immigrant community in Minnesota, I don't think that happens without some cooperation from politicians, without other people looking the either way, or maybe even being in the fraud themselves.
Exactly, because things like this don't happen without a little bit of willful ignorance from politicians or flat out involvement, right? And so that's really the measuring stick here, because what the American people have seen is that these politicians protect each other and don't suffer consequences at all. And all that does is destroy the trust in the system. And so I want to finish up because along with JD Vance, you now have the DOJ going after immigrants who were naturalized, but then go on to commit crimes on a large scale or violent scale. And they are working to now denaturalize these people, because the reality is this. If you were granted the opportunity to come from another country, any country, and enjoy the privileges of becoming an American citizen, the last thing you should be doing is committing crimes. And so let's check this out. Take a listen.
Push to strip criminal immigrants of their citizenship. David Spun has this story from Washington. Is it possible?
Well, Dana, it is possible, and it's becoming a much more frequent event to see DOJ officials securing through courts the denaturalization of people who obtained U.S. citizenship through fraud or obtained citizenship by committing other crimes.
How difficult is it to secure denaturalization? Because I know in Congress there's been legislation like the Scam Act introduced to make it, but it's not easy to secure denaturalization. Walk us through that.
Yeah, it's not, Lisa, and thank you for bringing that up, because, yeah, we would love to get some tougher laws from Congress on this. We've been talking to some members, but yeah, we can do it. These people, again, went to prison. One of them we're looking at now lied about when they got their citizenship, their naturalization, they lied about their marriage to get in this country. You can't do that. Being a citizen in our country is a privilege. It's not a right. And Donald Trump is going to have everyone in this country who deserves to be here, who's a citizen. And yeah, sure, it could be faster, it could be easier, but I think we're moving at lightning speed, given what we're up against.
I'm thinking about the Old Dominion shooter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe it's a right either. If you were not born in this country, then your ability to remain here is contingent on how you behave in this country. And if you're out here committing violent crimes, stealing from taxpayers, committing fraud or something like that, then that right, in my opinion, should be taken away. Because let's be real, we already have our own issues in this country with enough people who go out and commit crimes. And they were born here, so we can't get rid of them. Their families are American. They go back generations. And so what kind of sense does it make to take on another country's bad apples on top of that? Let's be honest. But those are my thoughts on the update. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your comments down below. Don't forget you enjoy the content. Smash that thumbs up and subscribe. And as always, until next time.